Hello, everybody who's watching this recording. My name is Bill Jones. I'm the author of Politics UK, which is coming out in its 10th edition in a few weeks' time. And what we're doing on this occasion is to get some recordings from frontline politicians at the local level and also at the MP level, and ask them some straightforward questions about why they're politicians, whether they enjoy it, and whether they think the system works. So on this occasion, we're looking at local government. I live in Beverley in the East Riding, and I have two councillors who are on the East Riding Council in front of me, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves very briefly, say who they are, what they do, and what their political status is when they were elected. Okay, starting with Dennis Healy. This is not the bushy eyebrowed version that the Labour Party had, but this is the less bushy-eyed Dennis Healy, who is a Lib Dem councillor and who lives close by in Beverley. Okay, Dennis, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Councillor Dennis Healy. I'm a Lib Dem ward councillor on the East Riding of Yorkshire Council, and also on leader of the Lib Dem group on Beverley Town Council.
Thanks very much. And your wife, Alison?
Hello, I'm Alison Healy, and I've just been recently elected as a Beverley Town Councillor.
Smashing. Okay, well, let's get on with the first question, which always interests me, and I think a lot of other students of politics, is why people actually, do this. Why do they put themselves up for public office? You're putting your head above the parapet, you get a lot of things thrown at you. In some instances, whatever you say can be examined very carefully and can come back to bite you. Remember Edwina Curry making that remark about eggs? It finished her career, promising career. At the time. The first question I can ask both of you, asking Alison first, perhaps, why did you? How did politics get to become such a big part of your life?
Okay, I think really, just as sort of like a member of Joe Public, I've always been interested in what happens around me, current affairs, things in the news. And I think, if you're that kind of person, you're political anyway, even if you're not part of party politics. In terms of party politics, I had always voted Liberal Democrat, but not actually joined the party. And to be honest, it hadn't occurred to me that I could join a political party. It seemed that something else that other people did. But a little bit in the spirit of, if you can't beat them, join them. When Dennis became so involved in the actual political party, that's when I became involved as well. Joined the local party, got sort of like drawn into the various activities, and a couple of years further down the line actually became the party treasurer, which I held the post for about 10 years. But I would say overall, it was just something that I was interested in, but it was the actual act of joining the party was because my husband was so involved with.
Okay, so obviously the marital connection was important there, but you always felt that you were a political person and decided, okay, well, I'll get involved in the proper way. What about you, Dennis? What was it that when did the political bug get you?
Well, I think similar to Alison, I've always been interested in current affairs and public life in a sense. I work for a local authority. I was involved in sort of being part of government decisions in the work that I did, but as a sort of like I was a civil servant almost, I suppose. So I was interested in the workings of it, but I always thought, well, politicians don't. That politics is something that happens to other people. It's not something that I've ever done. And I was 42 years of age, when I got interested, and I think that most people, certainly in the Lib Dems, they do it because they're asked to do it when somebody else makes it possible for them to believe that it can happen. And I just got to know somebody through my work, a guy who was a parliamentary candidate, and he sort of said, "Well, why don't you join the party?" Well, I wasn't even a member of the party, to be honest. I'd never even voted Lib Dem, to be truthful, but I did have a lot of connection at the time in the early 2000s with Charles Kennedy in particular, and a very principled stance that he took over the Iraq War. And the Liberal Dems were the only party that voted not to do that Iraq War, which of course we all now realise was completely pointless, so there were no weapons of mass destruction. So I had sympathy with the Lib Dems, and I joined because this guy asked me to, and then he said, "Why don't you stand for council?" Well, I don't stand for council. It's not what I do. I'm a working man. Can you do that sort of thing? And I realised you could do that sort of thing, and I did stand for the council. I didn't win, but I was sort of bitten by the bug. And the next thing was, why don't you stand for Parliament? And one thing led to another, and I did stand for Parliament in Hull North in 2010. And came within 600 votes of one of the biggest shocks of the night. We didn't quite win, but I think, I then realised there was a way forward because somebody had mentioned it to me, and the rest is history, really. And I subsequently became a local councillor and did get elected as a councillor. But always somebody usually is instrumental in making it happen, and that happened to me at the age of 42. That's
yes, relatively late in life, I suppose, but then again, it's not unusual in local government for professional people to become active in local politics when they've retired, perhaps from their jobs as architects, doctors, or whatever. It's quite normal. But next question I like to ask both of you then is, how does it affect your lives? I mean, how much time? I've had some contact with you, Dennis, because you were very, very effective in defending the people in the street where I live from the possible adverse effects of a refurbishing of the Beverley Arms Hotel. And we were really quite scared about what might happen to our road, which is a very nice road. And you were very, very good in helping us there. And you put a lot of time into it, attending meetings, replying to emails and all the rest of it, representing our interest to committees of one kind or another. But I mean, how much time, would you say that it is completely takes over your spare time, or do you still have time to sort of sit down and watch England beat Ukraine 4-0? Not that that's happened actually since 1966, but if you see what I mean. I mean, do you have any spare time? Does it leave you with it?
I certainly have time for watching England win football matches. It is quite all encompassing, really, I have to say. I mean, I still work full time, and sometimes it's very difficult to balance that. I do have quite a flexible role in my day job where I am based at home, but I do still put the hours in. So it doesn't mean I can attend meetings and things where I need to. But to do it properly, yes, you do need to put time in, and you do realise that actually you can change people's lives in a way that probably MPs can't. The example that you quoted there, you do have the ear of council officers. You do have to deal with people who are sometimes quite desperate. They're dealing with things that are really affecting their lives, impacting those lives badly. So things like environmental noise control and traffic and parking and developers. Development is always a big one. And people often turn to their local councillor as a last resort, really. And if they try and ask the MP, to help them with a local problem, the answer is that very often you need to talk to your local councillor.
You mentioned, sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned earlier on, quoting Ken Livingstone, saying that MPs, people think, well, they're much more important than local councillors, and they're, you know, they're part of the movers and shakers of this world.
Yeah.
But Ken Livingstone had a different.
Well, Ken Livingstone did say when he was elected that as a local politician, you know, you're dealing with things that impact on people's lives on a daily basis, whether it's the noisy neighbours or the traffic or the development or the antisocial behaviour, and he sort of took the view that in the end, local politicians are absolutely instrumental in affecting people's lives in a far more significant way, because if you're an MP, you just lobby fodder basically, and have to do as you're told by the Prime Minister or the leader of your party. Whereas with a local councillor, you do have that that you're able to operate quite autonomously. You don't have to worry about whips and things like that. You can just focus on your residents and trying to make things better for them. And really, local politics is about that. It's about improving people's lives, and it's less party political in that sense.
What percentage of the day? I'm just trying to get a sort of ballpark figure. You know, there's 24 hours in a day. On average, how many? What percentage or how many hours do you think you spend on the average day of the week doing council business?
At least 5 hours.
Really?
5 or 6 hours in addition to a full-time job.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility. Moving over to Alison, who's relatively recently elected.
Yes.
But how have you found, you know, putting your toes into the water, you know, since you've been elected? What's it been like, you know, the committee work and so forth? Are you impressed by it, or frustrated, or do you think, oh boy, I've got a hell of a lot to learn?
Probably a mixture of all three, actually. You see, if I go to how many hours this kind of work might take, remember Dennis has got 2 councillor roles, and he's the leader of the local party on the Beverley Town Council group. For me, it's a little bit different. I'm just on one town council. So my commitment is much reduced. I would say sort of like in a week, it's probably about 3 hours in total. So it's much, much less. Now, that isn't to say that I'm being lazy or not trying to do my best. It's just that that's the nature of the beast. It is much less. And also, because town councils are political in Beverley, and quite a few party political, I mean, around election times, although there is more cooperation, a lot of cooperation once you're actually on the council, but because they are elected positions and party political in that sense, there always seems to be some kind of political campaign that Dennis would get more involved with than I would. So I would say a lot less commitment, and a good councillor gives it a decent amount of commitment. And obviously if somebody says, oh, it's not much commitment at all, you know, they're probably not being much of a good councillor, because they're not, you know, listening to their residents and doing what they need. In terms of how do I feel going to the meetings, occasionally there's things that I've very definitely got to learn. Protocol, the standing orders, each council, or I've been on parish councils before and had over 15 years experience of that, but they're all slightly different. So sometimes you don't know things and you've got to learn those quickly. But we're all professional people, or we're people that have got life experiences and different things to bring to the town council. So we bring a set of skills that I think have been quite effective. So for example, there was a meeting, it wasn't a town council meeting in the sense of a full council, it was just a working council meeting, and because of my background in education, there was a couple of things around safeguarding that I was able to raise that were quite helpful. So we've all got a skill set that we can bring. And then sometimes I think as a newcomer, you look at something that's been done forever in a day since God was a boy, that particular way of doing things, and you just bring a fresh eye and you just say, why don't we do it this way? It's a bit more efficient or effective. And then if you've got Beverley Town Council has 14 people on it. If you've got 14 people with all those different experiences and we all respect and listen to each other, then you've got a very dynamic town council, or the potential for one.
Can I pick you up on that last point you made about respect and listening to people? Do you think that the discourse, the political discourse at the level of local government, the political level, is a civil one? Or do you feel it's too abrasive? You know, of course, Dennis has been in the game for longer than you. Maybe he's seen a sort of deterioration. Social media has had a role to play. People will say things on social media that they wouldn't dare say to you face to face. I just had the experience of something like that on Facebook today, but you know, it's quite a shock when you read it. You think that bloke wouldn't have said that to me face to face.
Yeah.
Do you think that, or do you think, generally speaking, it is respectful and constructive, the level of discourse?
I think at a local level, I've been shown respect. I'm pretty certain that that is going to be a movable feast. One of the problems that I think that we've got is we live in a country where sound bites matter. And you just need that one little quotation. I'm thinking of national politics now, to go in a newspaper. And I think that can be very divisive. On a local level, yes, we might bring out political leaflets where we're trying to push across our own point of view. We try not to badmouth another party, but we are going to stand up for what the Lib Dems believe in. And certainly when I've gone to council meetings, it has been very, very respectful. What you say with regards to social media, I think that's quite an interesting question, and it'd be quite interesting to be asked that question in 5 years' time, actually, because I think there's quite a bit of ignorance about politics amongst the general public, and the different levels of politics. So, for example, in Beverley, you've got the East Riding County politics level and you've got the town council politics level, and people get confused between the two, and they get confused between the responsibilities that each other have, and so there's quite a bit of ignorance out there. And you know, while people can post things in ignorance on social media, I think that is going to be something where the respect will be undermined over time. Maybe come back to me in 5 years and ask that question.
Okay. What about you, Dennis, on this topic of the, the civility of the discourse? Have you seen a change in the years you've been involved in it?
I think you're right about social media, first of all. I think that, but this comes from residents more than politicians in some respects. They sort of often feel that they have a platform to say what they want, and wouldn't make such comments to your face. Sometimes politicians make statements on social media that end their political careers, and that has happened in the East Riding as well. I think that generally speaking, at the political level, there is civility. I mean, in East Riding of Yorkshire Council, it's a Conservative-run council. We have an effective opposition now, which holds the council to account, and I think that's generally welcome. And I think that some of the questions that we've been asking regarding things like children's services, for example, have exposed massive issues, which have basically lain dormant otherwise. And there have been members of the Conservative Party who've been, really quite helpful and positive about the kind of things that we've been doing in terms of holding their leaders to account. So I think there is respect, generally speaking, but but also it's political as well, and we all want to, to communicate in the best way that we can. And as far as our discourse is concerned, with our communication with residents, it's not all that political, to be honest. It's more about being newsworthy. It's about telling residents what we're doing. So making them aware that we're standing up against that particular development, or we managed to get that particular park bench put there, or fill that pothole in there. It all sounds very mundane, but actually that's what it's about. That's what local politics is about. It's about improving citizens' lives over the most mundane things. It's sometimes doesn't seem all that glamorous, but actually that's what it is, and that's what local government at the basic level is. And we've got 168 parish councils in the East Riding, and they go down to the village level, and it's about residents just wanting to improve things. You said to any of these parish councillors, well, you're a politician, aren't you? They'd probably say, no, I'm not a politician. Well, you must be, because you're a parish councillor. But they probably wouldn't identify as politicians. They'd identify as citizens engaged in their local community.
Active citizens, yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, the final question I want to ask you both is, do you think that the system is working well? There's been lots of concerns about, representative liberal democracy not actually delivering. The level of trust is very low. There's lots of people who are disdainful of politicians, think that they're even worse than estate agents, in public opinion polls, that sort of thing. Or do you think that, no, it's basically okay, maybe it needs a bit of TLC, but fundamentally it does work? But one specific question, do you think that local government has enough competence, enough legislative power to do what it needs to do? Do you think there should be more devolution of power to the local level, either at, say, a regional level, or at your level, at the East Riding Council level, or indeed at the town council level? So can I throw that out and ask you to respond to that?
I think, as a general principle, we should be devolving power to as low as possible, really. So, for example, it worries me that there's things like planning, for example. The government are planning to decentralise that. They're planning to take planning decision-making ability away from local councils, so that instead of local people being able to have a say in the kinds of developments that affect them, they're taking that away and creating a system where you may as well not have local planning authorities anymore. And that sort of thing is concerning. I think people should have the right to make these decisions at that level. And I think sometimes people feel almost powerless, because they think often their decisions don't make any difference. And particularly in a system where representation is not in proportion to the votes that are cast, really. And sometimes people sort of take the view, well, what's the point of voting if actually I'm not going to be able to change anything? So I think the electoral system sometimes does. Some people find it quite frustrating. But generally speaking, we are a democracy in this country, and we have the first past the post system. And I think if you put yourself on a pedestal, if you communicate with your residents, if you do good things for residents and get things done, people will put their faith in you almost regardless of politics, in a way, regardless of party politics. So the principle of a democracy in building up from the ground level, at the local level, the parish council level that we have here. I think parish councils have about the right level of devolution in that sense. They do have their own budgets. They do have precepts that they can take from local people. And then you've got things like highways and education and so on devolved to the county level. I think as a general principle that works. But as I say, I think that sometimes people just feel frustrated that their voices aren't heard, and sometimes they don't bother. So if you have a local by-election with a turnout of 25%, that's about as good as you're going to get. And I think that that's quite worrying, actually, that so many people feel so far away from the political process as to say it doesn't matter. That's concerning. I think we should be trying to embed in schools and young people, you know, what it's about more. I mean, we've got a daughter and she's quite switched on to politics and how it all works. You know, I'm pretty sure she's strict.
No choice.
She's strict ahead. You know, she'll
a very political family that she's in.
Yeah, but I think that most young people aren't getting enough exposure to that. Because most of them live in normal families where there's no politics, you know. So there's often an argument for teaching civil matters in schools, you know, and helping young people to understand and engage with it a bit more.
It's a difficult problem, that political education. But what about you, Alison, on the system? I mean, you haven't had that much experience of it at this level that you're now representing. But do you feel that it is functional? It does actually deliver, you know, public goods to the community?
I think so. I mean, obviously, I've been on a parish level, and I would say that was very effective, and it worked very, and still does very effectively with its East Riding ward councillors. I think the one thing that I would add to what Dennis says is, if I like your phrase TLC for the system. I think as you know, as a country as a whole, as we look forward to politics, and if we do want to get a diverse range of people involved in politics, and if we want to get sort of like good people with good skill sets, whatever they happen to be, we need to think about the training and the induction that we actually receive. And, you know, I think the phrase ad hoc perhaps sums it up best. Certainly, most of the things that I've learned over the years have been by actually doing the job or turning up to meetings, and not with my cat because I have a dog, to turning up to meetings and sort of like learning on the job. But actually, you're making some quite important decisions, and I think we should look at our induction and our training opportunities. So, for example, the ones perhaps that could be offered at a local level for town councillors and parish councillors, which always tend to be during the day. We need more during the evening. Not all of them are, sometimes they are in the evening. I do know, I think when you were an East Riding councillor first elected, you had quite a good induction package, didn't you? So maybe it's just that level below that doesn't. So I think, you know, give people the skills for the job and they can do it.
And if you had any advice to give to a young person thinking of becoming a councillor, what would you say, both of you? Would you say it's a great thing to do for your community, or would you say think about it very carefully because it's a big chunk of your life?
I think well, it depends where they want to go. I mean, I always think that if people want to go into politics, it's good to have some proper life experience. There's a lot of examples of politicians who are career politicians and have done nothing else with their lives. So I personally think that, I mean, as I said earlier, I was 42 when I got involved. And so I think I'd say to any young person, if my daughter said, Dad, I want to be a councillor when I'm 18, I'd probably say, no, come on, get yourself sorted out first and get your career underway. And then when you've got something that you can offer, you know, come back and offer it. But I mean, you know, we have examples of young people. I mean, our mayor last year, Tom, you know, is a young person, 21. He was mayor, youngest ever mayor of Beverley. And he has some great ideas, and all credit to them. So I will always encourage young people, but you know, they've got to get their careers right first of all. Really, you're at the will and the behest of the electorate in politics. It can be, you've seen it all there on the nights of the election counts where somebody suddenly lost their job and lost everything because they'd been made redundant by the electorate. And so I think it's important that young people have their careers, first of all. And if they want to do some good and try and become more community minded when they've established themselves in the direction, all well and good. And by that time, they'll have some real life experience as well, which will probably be invaluable for them in their future decision making.
Would you say something? Yeah, I was going to say, would you say something similar to your daughter, Alison?
Don't worry, we're not going to have a marital, but I don't quite agree with Dennis on this one.
Yeah.
I would actually say to her, go for it, because I think I do agree with Dennis in that I don't like it when MPs have been career politicians. I think just something, however long, in the world of work or whatever is important. But actually we have so many people who don't get involved in politics at a local level. And, you know, with the best will in the world, and I will include myself on this, we're all older and we're all maybe sort of like got certain views entrenched. And yet, you know, Dennis has mentioned our Mayor Tom last year, who had so many different ideas, and we don't have enough young people coming through in politics. So I would actually say to our daughter, definitely go for it. Be that at 18. If you're not elected, it doesn't matter. Try again next time, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, which is to serve your community. I would encourage that, because I think a good town council, a good East Riding council, if you've got a range of different experiences and outlooks, that can only be a good thing, rather than everyone following one view and one experience. So yeah, I would say really go for it. And actually, when young people do get involved in politics, it brings a spring to the step. It's invigorating. It's good.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. That's really good advice. I mean, it's worth thinking that the younger Pitt was 20 when he became Chancellor of the Exchequer, and 23 when he was Prime Minister. And then across the pond, we see Joe Biden, 78, when he becomes president. I think an early start, if you really are committed to it, is a good thing to make. And I look back on my life and think, well, instead of studying it, maybe I should have actually been practicing it. I've probably done a damn sight more good. But, you know, helping young people to understand the system and how to become active in it, I think there's a role for that as well. So thanks very much, Dennis and Alison. It's been a great fun, great pleasure to talk to you.